Good evening, everyone. It's 6:31, so we're going to get started. My name is Josh Fiala. I'm with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. We're excited to be here with you this evening to talk about the Nagog Hill Orchard. This is the first of two community meetings which we're hosting, which I think you have all heard about, and we have some information to frame a discussion this evening, hopefully a productive discussion for the community. And I'm here joined by some colleagues, which I'll introduce in a moment, but I just wanted to give you a feel for where we're headed this evening. So here's our agenda, and thank you for coming into this space with us, and we welcome you for this important discussion. Again, we'll give a brief introduction about who we are, why we're here in this role, and what our format for the evening is. Then we want to give a brief recap on the context of the orchard and talk about some of the details, both in terms of its timeline and where we are today, and some facts and figures about the property. And then we really want to focus today's session, and it's really an interactive session. We're glad that you're here. Hopefully you're here to think with us and roll up your sleeves and provide feedback within this process. We'd like to focus that feedback on defining shared criteria and defining shared objectives. And we'll frame out what we mean by that and why we think that's important. But that, I think, will help the community, you all as community members, thinking about how this orchard and property is important in your lives and for the town, and hopefully sort of reconcile those feelings you all have and the importance of it with the processes that have been underway and that many people have, from what we've heard, and we'll go through this in detail, perhaps felt unheard in these processes, and we're hoping that our exercises this evening will be a productive way to integrate your voices going forward. Then we'll talk some about near-term outcomes and how the exercise this evening can help to shape both near-term and long-term outcomes, and then also spend a moment on next steps in this process. And just to highlight up front, one of the critical next steps is our second community meeting, which will be on April 14th. We have information about that to share as well. And that session will really build upon this session. So what we're hoping is to gather a fair amount of information from you tonight, and then to compile that information and bring it back and share that back out with you and build on it in the second session as well. So that's our agenda. And now I'll get back into a little bit of context setting if you're still wondering what MAPC is, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and who this guy Josh Fiala is. So first about our agency and who we are. We're the regional planning agency for the greater Boston area. We provide planning assistance to cities and towns throughout the region, roughly the geography within the 495 belt, which we got to experience all the wonders of the traffic coming out on the 495 belt this evening. And so we provide planning technical assistance, convening conversations, usually difficult community conversations around the future of land, in this case, the future of properties. We also deal with zoning, housing, transportation, cultural and historical resources, any variety of topics which you can imagine are dealing with both the future and the disposition and use of land in our region. So we're happy to be a part of this process and hopefully helping the town community and the town leadership to come to some productive outcomes for the Nagog Hill Orchard. So how we're involved in the purpose of this meeting, we're really here. We've been contracted by the town through a grant that the town receives, so they're not paying for this from the town budgets. It's from a state grant. And we're here to convene community conversations. That's really our role, is to create the space for a conversation. We will be doing talking this evening, of course, to create the framework for the conversation, but we also want to hear a lot from you tonight, and that's really the purpose of what we're doing. We hope to gather everything that you have. I'll make a note from this, and I'll say this again a lot throughout the meeting, but the Post-it notes which are on your tables and the pens are really the instrument for us to receive that feedback and then be able to take it back to our office and compile it all. So we'll be trying to take notes as you speak verbally as well, and of course the meeting will be recorded on LCTV. But if you can, and you'd oblige us to also make notes on the Post-its, that would be very helpful for us as we're trying to make sure that your feedback is integrated in this work. Our primary role this evening, and then in the second meeting as well, and where we have observed that we could make the most impact in helping people to come together and build some consensus in this process, is around objectives and criteria. So that's what we're focusing on, and one of the things that we've seen a little bit of a disconnect around. And we're here ultimately to discuss the future options for the orchard. I think this evening, it may be, I'm projecting a little bit, but I don't know the answer to this, but perhaps this meeting might be a little disappointing to some because we might not focus as specifically on outcomes around the orchard, but focusing more on those criteria and objectives, and then hope in the second meeting to talk more about the application of those criteria and objectives and specific outcomes and the future options. So in terms of meeting logistics, we have a presentation we prepared to help guide the conversation and frame it out. It will be an interactive meeting, so please just sort of prepare yourselves for that. There will be some small group discussion, some writing of notes, and some bringing forward of your ideas. We're going to post some ideas on some whiteboards as well. And as I've noted, please do utilize the Post-it notes as a mechanism to get your thoughts into our notes. And then we will be compiling that feedback and bringing it back to the second community meeting on the 14th of April. I understand that I think this is also being live streamed to LCTV, so we probably may have an audience at home as well. And those online participants can interact with this process live as well. And anyone who's watching a recording of this meeting can also access the same online survey. The survey is available with the link on the screen, or you can take a clip of the QR code with your camera and it will take you to the link as well. The survey, which it will take you to, uses the same prompts and questions that we'll be going through in the meeting tonight. So you're able to use that either synchronously at home right now or later online. And anyone who's not able to attend the meeting can go to that survey and provide us feedback as well. We'll integrate all the comments online that we receive with the comments we receive in the room. So just to get our muscles of interaction and feedback flowing a little bit, we have some icebreaker type questions, which are also useful feedback for us to know. And we invite you to start using that process of taking some notes on the Post-its, but then comparing with your neighbor. And then we'd like to hear some of the things that bubble to the top in terms of people that are having similar thoughts. So first question is, why did you choose to attend today's session? And the second is, what is one question you bring in today's space? So just take a couple minutes, jot down on the Post-it first, turn to a neighbor that's sitting next to you and just see how similar or dissimilar your thoughts are. And then we'll just take a quick sample around the audience just to hear a few of those ideas. And I'll give you a moment to do that. So for anyone who's gotten through that exercise, would anyone care to share either of those answers with the room?
Get up to date on the orchard process, where we're at.
Yeah, to get up to date on the orchard and the process, understand where we're at in the overall scheme. Thank you.
I chose to attend because I'm concerned about the orchard's future.
Great. Concern about the orchard's future. Thank you. Yes.
I came because I'm like worried about what the orchard will be like going forward and what it will look like, and I'm gonna miss the peaches.
Great. I'm just repeating, we're worried about the orchard going forward and concerned about the peaches, or miss the peaches.
I came because I believe that land conservation is forever, and I was shocked to think that Littleton would sell.
So concerned that thinking that land conservation is forever, and shocked that Littleton would consider selling.
I was at the original meeting when we approved the purchase of that orchard a long time ago now, and I remember being very encouraged that the town now owns this very old piece of property, and being very discouraged to learn both what it costs to keep that orchard going and how it failed, and still hoping that we will be able to use that in a way that enables it to be used for generations to come, that doesn't involve building property and turning that over to commercial development.
Great, thank you. And I guess I'll just want to make a clarification note for those who are watching online. Can they hear the audience, or do I have to repeat everything? They can.
Hear.
Okay, very good. I will see repeat.
But I can't hear it. When people are talking up there, they're not talking loud enough. I don't know if you can hear me.
Okay.
But it would be nice to hear the questions.
Yes, so please try to, when you do provide feedback, to reserve me from having to repeat everything, so that will make our meeting quite long. Do try to speak up so your fellow participants can also hear you. Yes, sir, in the back.
Looking forward to hearing why Littleton is so important to you.
Thank you.
I'm here because I think the town should be following the Morrison's original intent and wishes, which is to keep the property as one contiguous unit. Amen.
All right, well, thank you for that sample. Yeah, well, I think one more.
I'm here because I think it's important that the Neshoba Praying Indians have some stake in this land as part of their heritage.
Thank you. Thank you for that, and thank you for putting those down on notes. I might ask one of my colleagues to actually collect those so we can just keep the notations in order in terms of the questions. And while our colleagues do that, I was remiss in not introducing them earlier, so I'll have a moment to collect myself. I'll do that. So we have Courtney Lewis, who is collecting here with you there, Javier Gutierrez in the back. We also have Emily Wanzer, who's collecting, and Lindsay Randall, who may be out welcoming folks who just entered there. So those are our MAPC colleagues with us this evening, and thank you for them for all of their efforts on this project as well. So given that this is a community discussion with potential for passion in what we're feeling in terms of the orchard property, and we've heard a fair amount of frustration in interviews as well, we wanted to go through some community norms for this meeting. I have them here too as a reminder. So as we discuss the property this evening and all the questions, we'd just like you to keep these in mind to help us engage in a civil manner in a productive way. So be fully present, try to avoid sort of looking at phones and not being in the room, and really paying attention to the conversations. Presume that we are all here with good intentions, that we're welcoming and want to extend that welcome to others, so please give people that benefit of the doubt. We'd like to use one mic as much as possible, both in the larger room when people are sharing with the large group, but also in your smaller tables. If one person's speaking, please give them the opportunity to do so. Listen for understanding. Let's not jump to conclusions about what we think people are saying or where they're coming from, but let's try to listen really deeply to what they're saying and how to understand that ourselves. Take space and make space. That means, please, we're looking for everyone to be a participant this evening, so please do encourage yourself. If you're less prone to talk in groups like this, please take the moment to do so. If you're more prone to be verbally engaged, take a moment to just step back and give room for others. Use I statements. We're not speaking for others, we're speaking for ourselves, and that usually helps to avoid confusion. Suspend judgment, please, as much as you can, and give people the benefit, again, the benefit of the doubt around that. And if someone does make a mistake in terms of something they've said, which is sensitive or maybe could be construed as harmful or hurting. Use a oops, a simple oops if you're the one that has said that, or an ouch if you're hearing something from a fellow participant that might strike you as harmful. So those things help keep us all in line, and we would invite you to use these norms as we go through our discussion this evening. We also don't presume that we've got it just right, and so we invite the room, if anyone else would like to suggest other meeting norms that should be integrated this evening, we'd be happy to note them on the sheet as well. So we can have general agreement that these are reasonable for us to abide by this evening. So thank you so much for that. So as a part of our preparation for these community discussions, we have embarked on several stakeholder interviews, more individual conversations. We've performed 15 interviews, which involved a variety of people for, I think, just around 20 total individuals that we've interviewed. We included a site tour of the property, walking through all the various fields, the orchards, the buildings themselves, and have tried to become familiar. With that, we still state, of course, our primary role in this is as a convener, so I expect that many of you in this room are more expert in the property itself and the history of the property than we are, so just recognize that. But we have tried to inform ourselves and be educated about the property so that we can convene this conversation constructively. A few themes.
Is the text of those interviews available anywhere if we want to read it to catch up?
I think that's something we would have to consider. The interviews right now are, the way that the notations have been taken are with the person that we interviewed, and we did not make clear to those interviewees that we would be making their comments public. So we would just have to consider that. But I'm sure there's some way that we could figure out, at least to anonymize them and then make them public. So we can take that under advisement and think about that. Thank you for the question. The stakeholder interview themes, if we look at those collectively, again, this is at a pretty high level, not getting into the details of each conversation. But across the conversations, we heard a fair amount of frustration and concern, as you can imagine. And that frustration and concern were around a few recurring and resonant themes around the property management and oversight of the property, particularly the town's oversight and management of the property, and even with the previous leaseholder sort of oversight of that lease. The financial and budgetary strain and considerations of both the town not investing in the property and maintaining it or putting funds towards that investment, but also the concern with how much it might take for the town to properly care for the property in its current circumstances. A fair amount of concern around community involvement and transparency of the process to date. Hopefully our meetings can help to heal some of those concerns somewhat, but not the complete optimist that these two meetings will resolve those concerns. And then also concerns around the indigenous perspectives on the land and advocacy for the Neshoba Praying Indian tribe. So those are some larger ideas around the frustrations and concerns that came through I would say almost each of the interviews. We also heard enthusiasm and opportunity in the conversations as well. The historical and cultural significance of the property resonates with so many community members, and there's a real opportunity there. The opportunity for proper stewardship and land management, with these being really emblematic of the approach that the town could take to land stewardship and care. The notion of agricultural preservation in the community and the importance of this property in that manner, and with agricultural preservation restriction on the property, and food access in general, and this property playing a role in helping to have access to healthy and organic foods. And then conservation and sustainability more generally as themes, and how this property relates to surrounding conservation lands and can be a part of a larger network. We also made a few observations from what we've been able to see into the processes through those previous conversations, the interviews we've held, and also looking back through previous materials. A few of the observations are that this what we've observed that the process has not centered equity in both its approach and sort of thinking about outcomes. So there's a number of ways in our planning processes that we try to do so. So trying to be inclusive in the stakeholders which are involved in the process, making sure that those stakeholders are representative of the community and really going through a process in lengths to do so. But also the thinking about the outcomes in an equitable manner as well, and asking simple questions like who is harmed by the outcome that we're leading towards, or who is benefited by that outcome. Those types of questions may be lacking in the process. And then also doing things like full circle communication. Yes, a clarifying question?
First of all, an equity-centered process. Who are the stakeholders that you're concerned with giving equity to?
Who are they? In terms of any process that I'm referencing, or this process specifically?
Where you brought up that there's stakeholders, you want to make sure the stakeholders have equity. Who are the stakeholders you think?
Yeah, usually when we think about an equity-centered process, the stakeholders are those who are marginalized. So in this case, it could be any group which might not have access to public processes, might not have access to being recognized as a full citizen in other ways that other people feel privileged. So oftentimes it breaks down of either race or class or education even. So those are ways that we look at the stakeholder population that's being engaged in a process that we typically are undertaking, and then look to bring those together.
Would that be in this case?
It would be like all the groups that I just described applied to Littleton. Yeah. So the other thing that, I'll just keep going for a moment. The other thing, 2 items that I'll just mention too are full circle communication, which we are, I think, modeling in this two meeting series, where the feedback that's gathered, we would then bring back to the community to see, so that you can actually see what we've gathered from you, and we plan to do that in the second meeting. And then all the processes, and these are ambitions. We ourselves don't meet them in every case, but trying to, through the process, strengthen and build the network within the community. So we're not, hopefully as a process like this unfolds, even if it's a divisive process, a divisive topic, it's hopefully in the long run, because of the transparency and sort of way that the process was undertaken, bringing the community together and strengthening the networks within the community as opposed to dividing people. So those are ambitions that we try to bring into the process. I'm not saying they are completely lacking here, but I'm saying that these are things that could potentially be strengthened. So we're going to turn toward the property itself and just do a quick recap as quick as we can, so that we can get to the meat of the interactive exercises here. But we did want to do some level setting about the property itself and a recap of the context. So again, a historical property dating back to the Neshoba Praying Indian village in the pre-founding of the town, then a more recent legacy with the Morrisons and the Morrison Orchard, currently town-owned, as I think most everyone knows, and it has some significant restrictions, including an APR, agricultural preservation restriction. So on the agricultural preservation restriction, this is a binding agreement between the landowner and the state. It continues beyond ownership, so it goes from owner to owner, it binds all future owners. It exists in perpetuity. It requires active use of the land for commercial farming, and that is currently not being, compliance with that is not upheld. It is administered by MDAR, which is the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources. And we'll show you in a moment the portions of the property on a map which are subject to that APR. Just a little bit about the timeline, and I know that people are thinking about what the current events are, but here's both some of the current events and looking back within the last 5 years or so. So there's a lot of activity that's occurred within the last 5 years. This is pretty much within the time frame of the lease not being renewed. So this is, we've heard a lot of the really dedicated effort that Littleton residents through the Orchard Working Group have put many hours and much dedication into trying to resolve this situation for the town, and they should be appreciated in this effort and for their previous efforts. They've gone through many iterations of both research, analysis, understanding what the options are, processes of RFPs, RFIs, RFQs, to really get that next steward of the property aligned. The most recent of which, the more recent events, just to bring you all up to speed, which I think you're all on the same page, is last town meeting in May, there was a vote to dispose of the property. That vote failed by a small margin. That was to ultimately sell the property. The select board reconsidered over the summer while also trying to procure our involvement to convene conversations and basically released an RFI for lease of the property, which occurred in September. And then that has resulted in a single candidate for lease being interviewed, being negotiated with, and that negotiation is still open. So that's the current status. In a brief kind of, you can see some of the other milestones within that last 5-year period. I'd like to set that 5 years within the larger context. Of course, we heard from members of the audience who were present at the original vote to approve purchase of the property. So that occurred in 1999. The town meeting vote to acquire the property from the Morrisons. At about shortly thereafter, there was a 10-year lease signed with the Nagog fruiters, who was Charlie Auger. And that lease ran for more than 10 years and was not renewed in 2021. The agricultural preservation restriction through funds the town received was enacted in 2002, so shortly after the acquisition and that lease arrangement. So that's a little bit longer history on the property, and I'd just like to set that in the context of that even larger time frame. So the land here has a longer history, of course, all land does, and we see, again, graphically, that last 10 years, which we were just covering, is the very right end of this timeline. And you can see over those hundreds of year periods now, those larger intervals, this property has been at the center point, really, of the town's settlement, the town's founding, and even prior to, as indigenous peoples were the original stewards of the land, and then there were all sorts of sort of colonial arrangements that occurred to create the Neshoba Praying Indian Plantation, Praying Indian Village, and so that is a part of this property and history and a part of the legacy here as well. So I just say all that to put this in a broader context, and hopefully this timeline where we look at that, the approach of these events in that expanding manner helps us to take a step back from the pressing need of the current, what's happening this year, what's happening last month, what's happening in the last 5 years. And I think hopefully today we invite you to think about this property in that larger context and step back and think about what will be best for the property over the long term, thinking more on the horizon that we see here. So there have been, as I mentioned, a number of options which have been explored. There's been a fair amount of due diligence that's been occurring in that more recent period. And these are some of the results of that work. So it's a difficult property to resolve its stewardship and ownership, or stewardship and care for. And you see the number of responses that have occurred through some of these RFP processes out to the broader community of those individuals and stakeholders who might be able to care for this land. And so this is the context of what we're working with and working in within. I invite my colleague Courtney just to walk us through spatially some of the maps which we put together. Some of these are new maps which MAPC has done. As planners, we can't work without making some maps. So we have that. And Courtney will go through this quickly just to, again, set the stage for our conversation.
Good evening. As Josh noted, I'm going to be pretty brief. Many of you have already viewed and have visited the site, but it's located in the southeast corner of the town near the Acton-Littleton border. It's just about three miles from us now. The total property, the entire property measures approximately 94 acres, and 52 of those are under the APR that Josh mentioned. The property itself is located at the intersection of Nagog Hill Road and Neshoba Road, and it sits just north of the Sarah Doublet Forest. So there's a lot going on this map, but the property is highlighted in yellow, and basically a portion of the property sits within the surface water supply protection area. Nagog Pond supplies a portion of the town of Acton's drinking water, which many of you are familiar with. This is the image that Josh mentioned. The areas highlighted that are shaded or hatched in pink are the portions of the property that are under the APR. The orange sections of the property are under the jurisdiction, at least in terms of assessors data, of the select board, and the pink areas are overseen by the Conservation Commission in partnership with the Littleton Land Trust. The entire site is zoned for, lies within the town's residential zoning district. Of course, permitted uses are residential as well as agriculture. This is another figure that kind of shows the level of protections or restrictions for different portions of the property. The majority of the site is under the APR, and there are other portions of the property, as I mentioned, that are under the protection of the Conservation Commission. Back in November, we had an opportunity to tour the site and walk pretty much every corner of it. We had an opportunity to take inventory of some of the structures, as well as the condition of many of the trees and fields on the site. In terms of topography, the property gently slopes outward towards the surrounding water bodies, and that also impacts runoff from the site. There are also a number of outcroppings located throughout the property. In terms of soil, a huge swath of the property is considered farm prime land by the state, and the two shades shown here, the darker brown is prime farmland, and the lighter brown represents farmland of statewide importance.
Excuse me, for people who might be colorblind, could you go back to that and point out those two places?
Yes. So this area is the farmland of statewide importance, this swath of the land here, and then this swath represents prime farmland.
Thank you.
Can you clarify what the black dots represent?
Oh, these are surrounding structures. Sorry, so those are our homes surrounding the property. And this map just shows the FEMA flood zones. There As we toured the property, we noticed that there is a low spot, I think, right in this area where it tends to be wet. I think there were cattail growing as we walked that portion of the site. I'm happy to answer any questions, and as I do that, I'm gonna invite Josh back up to explain the next portion of the.
I also have a mic now from LCTV, so if you have a question, just wait for me to come with a mic so that everybody online and in the room can hear.
And
what is the difference between the prime farmland and the state significant farmland?
There is an official definition that the state uses. I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can look that up in about 5 minutes and give you an accurate answer.
And then just in terms of some clarifying questions too, if you wouldn't mind, you can also write them down on the Post-its and we'll collect those. And any answers we're not able to provide this evening, we can look at for next time as well. So other questions?
I have a question for Courtney.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Who was present during those tours that you took? Could you describe a little bit of what the parties were?
It was myself, Josh, Javier, and
Matthew, Mark, and Sarah Seward. Oh, hi, Sarah. And the facilities general, Eric Durba. Yes.
How much land is being considered to be leased for this orchard?
Yeah, the portions of property which are currently in discussion for the lease are those which are identified on this map as the APR lands, the Agricultural Preservation Restriction lands.
So that's the 52?
That's the 48 roughly, yeah.
48.
Which you can see on this figure with the crosshatch. All right, yes, one more.
Won't be loud enough. What's permitted inside of these slash marks as far as the watershed from Lake Nagog?
Oh, and from like in this figure here,
Mm-hmm.
the restrictions. We can check on that too. I don't think we've looked into the exact language that's in these water protection areas locally. So there might be some restrictions on the types of septic systems that can be used, but we'll have to check on that.
More along the line of drilling into the aquifer. Is it Concord's water supply and not Acton's? It's Concord's. Didn't we go to court with them to try and get into the aquifer? We lost. Is that a fact or not?
It is Concord's and we won.
We did win, so we can drill inside of those areas?
I'm not sure exactly what we can do, but we did not lose the lawsuit.
I don't know if the areas can be drilled in, but we are allowed to take water out of that aquifer.
Nice, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so not seeing any other clarifying questions, but if you do have a thought, you can make a note. Yes, one more.
I wrote it down.
Oh, sure.
In the slide where 1625 was listed, there's a footnote that says 500 acres was allocated for Neshoba Prairie and Indians and descendants. What does that mean? Does that mean they have any ownership in it? Does it have any implications for what we're even considering doing?
I think my understanding of that footnote is that that is a historical allocation that has, through a series of land transitions and other means, effectively is not brought to present day, but it is a historical notation.
Oh, sorry. I do have an answer.
Oh, go ahead. Courtney has an answer.
And I do have an answer to your question about the difference between prime farmland versus farmland of statewide importance. Prime farmland is land which is best suited for agriculture as defined by the National Soil Property and Climate Criteria, and farmland of statewide importance is suited for crop production but lacks all the criteria required for prime. So essentially, prime farmland is more pristine.
Great, thank you, Courtney. And here was that diagram to go with the description Courtney just gave as well. So we have made it to sort of the meat of our interactive period, but before we turn to that, I did want to actually invite Lynn, who's here on behalf of the Neshoba Prairie Indians, to make a statement. Oh, our observations about engagement. Yeah.
So I do appreciate the way he just described or answered that question about the 500 acres and where we find it to be today and who the descendants are, because that's why they're facilitating, because they have a nice way of putting things and they really help us to neutralize our thoughts and come together on like the future. So unfortunately, Strong Bear Medicine and Quiet Storm could not be with us tonight, even though that was their original intent. They cannot be here for two sad reasons. Sadly, they are not here. That's the first sad reason. And second, one of their medicine elders just passed away. So they're in the middle of their 7-night fire burning. Someone mentioned to me, what is the Jewish term? That's right. So any of you that, that's the correlation, similarity. But Chief Quiet Storm would like me to read something of importance that she would like to share. Good evening. First, I want to offer a heartfelt thank you to the communities of Littleton, Neshoba, and all of New England for the tremendous kindness and support that you all have shown to the Massachusetts Neshoba Praying Indians for the return of our ancestral lands. We are eternally grateful and look forward to continuing an honorable friendship of reverence with all of you as we move forward. To the Board of Selectmen of Littleton, Massachusetts, we respectfully ask that you return our ancestral lands where Nagog Hill Orchard sits upon back to the Massachusetts Neshoba Praying Indians. Littleton has an opportunity to preserve history while supporting the futurity of the Neshoba Praying Indians' cultural heritage, environmental sustainability, food sovereignty, and self-determination. This alliance will restore equity and agency for the Neshoba Praying Indians while working in unity with the entirety of Littleton's community and beyond. This is a historic and notable moment for you to demonstrate a true land acknowledgement for the Massachusetts Neshoba Praying Indians. We look forward to working together with you in a harmonious and productive way for all. Thank you for your time and consideration. Aquini, Chief Quiet Storm of the Massachusetts Neshoba Praying Indian. My name is Lynn Gonzalez. I am the wife of Strong Bear Medicine, Sagamore of the Neshoba Praying Indians. I live here in Littleton. I encourage all of you to use this evening to share in the I terminology, in your I statements. What does it mean as a citizen, as a representative of this town for yourself, for your families, for your future, for your wants and your desires? Because when you share that, we can hear it, I can hear it, I can bring it back, they can watch this recording. It's important because if you know them, or if you've been to one of their talks, you know that they are all about community. They are all about what is best for all of us. One of the most important things that you saw on this slide was about the waterways. Water is life, water is everything. Whatever happens at the top of that hill affects all of us, and we know this. I wouldn't focus on making this meeting about the Neshoba Praying Indians. The reason why I say that is their wants and desires are in their proposal. If you read their proposal and it matches what you want, it matches what you believe should happen in this community, then it might be the right thing. If you don't, then you don't. But if you do, consider that. But don't make this meeting about that. One thing that you'll notice about Native American people is they do everything in a circle. They do everything around community. They also do the talking stick. If you have the mic, you get to talk. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate the facilitation because that's what this brings for us. We were happy to hear everything you have to say and everything you want to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. I appreciate you taking the time to do that with us. And just, I feel obligated to say that we actually hadn't planned this in advance, so this was something that occurred due to circumstances with their grieving. And so just thought it was important to take the time before we get into this next conversation to give the space for Lynn for that comment. So as we move toward the next conversation, let me just get back to it. We want to focus now on defining those shared criteria with you as the community. And there are two items that we want to focus on. The first is at a higher level objectives. What are the outcomes that we want? And then the criteria by which we'll judge those outcomes. But first, a little context on goals and outcomes that were set. So this was back from the community goals around the time of the acquisition, 2000. So the Nagog Hill Orchard was acquired for conservation, passive recreation, and continued agricultural use only. There were 4 main community goals that were part of the town's open space and recreation plan at that time. That's what's noted here as OSRP. And you see those here: protection and enhancement of the natural environment, groundwater of good quality and quality to meet existing and future demand, quality recreational facilities and adequate recreational opportunities for all town residents, and preservation of the community character. So those were kind of in the town's thinking at that time. And not to say those particular items need to be carried forward to this moment, but just to give you an idea of the types of goals and objectives that were being outlined. So a little bit about differentiating between the two here, since we're doing both together in this exercise separately, but we're doing them in this chunk of time. First, we'll start with objectives. Objectives are the desired results. So we would like them as much as possible to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound to a certain extent. So those are things to keep in mind. We don't have to follow that exactly, but they're really outlining the outcomes that we would like to see occur on this land. What are the outcomes? The criteria are the measures. So I was looking to try to find the easiest analogy, and I think one of them would be that, like, an objective is, I need to buy a car. And the criteria would be what color, how much horsepower, is it electric, is it hybrid? So those would be more detailed criteria that you would be judging the outcome of buying a car from. So the criteria are the measures that we can evaluate how well we're meeting the objectives by. So they're quantifiable, verifiable, consistent, and they're really more detailed and get into the meat of what the concerns are and what the shared concerns are from the community. What we're hoping tonight is that we can gather as many of the thoughts from you in this room, from those online who are taking the survey, around objectives first, then we'll do criteria second. I think that building on the exercise that way will help us all to think about the larger frame and then the details. We'll collect everything that you put together, both in this room and online. Look for patterns in that, so we'll be pulling it all together, compiling it, and then we'll bring that back to you in the next meeting. So shared objectives that we've heard, this is a bit of a starting point, and we do have, let me just put this, so these are shared objectives we've heard in the interviews, reviewing materials, etc. We've heard, and these are shared objectives that we've heard in almost every conversation, that people want sustainable stewardship of this land. People want to fulfill promises to honor the legacy of the land. They want to comply with the requirements on the land, those being the APR requirements, and engage a partner or partners to manage the property. We've heard almost unanimously that people don't feel the town is equipped to manage this property alone, so they need a partner or partners of some kind. So those are things that we've heard in common in terms of objectives, outcomes that we'd like to see happen. So it's a starting point. These might not be the most comprehensive list, but it's a starting point to seed the conversation with you all. We're inviting you to help us fill in this list. So we'd like you to turn to the people around your table. We're not asking you to come to consensus to put things down on a Post-it note, but we'd like to have you all in conversation around your tables about what you think good ideas are, and that will hopefully help inform what you are putting on Post-it notes. But if you have an idea that you really want us to be recording, it does not need the buy-in of your group to put it on a Post-it note and give to us. So in small groups, we'd like you, I'll return this screen back to those initial shared objectives that we have unearthed, but we invite you to do the same and just think through, what are the outcomes that you want to see? What are the objectives here? And make sure you get everything down on a Post-it note, or else it will be relatively invisible to us. We'll give you 10, 12 minutes to do this together. They wanted me to have it on this screen, but I'll All right, everyone. I would like to bring the room back together. Please, if you could pause the conversations. Appreciate everyone. If you could all come back together for a moment. Thank you. It's good to see the conversations in the small groups. We appreciate that. If you haven't had a chance and you'd like to stretch your legs a little bit, if you can either hand your comments, post-its to one of our colleagues, or you're welcome to just come up here and post it on one of these top four boards, which are all for the landing spot for objectives. And we'd like to hear maybe just a little bit if there were some themes in the conversation you were having about objectives that resonated in your small group. We'd just like to hear a few of those just so we can understand what some of the conversation was about. Any resonant themes in your conversations? Emily, do you want to take we're going to take the mic back to you, sir. Oh, Javier's got a mic there.
Yeah, okay, bring the mic.
Right behind you.
Oh, here's the mic right here. This is George Sanders, and I'm a resident here in Littleton. My concern is that it was my understanding that the town of Littleton received notice from the state about this property. And since they hadn't taken care of business over the last couple of years, I understood that the state sent a strong message to them to get your act together, or the state could come in and take it over. I understood that they gave them 60 days. Can the select board enlighten us on what the state disposition is with regards to the status of this property?
I can't give you a full answer. The letter that they asked for a response within 60 days. And I would say their disposition is unknown to us. It's a political discussion to some extent, as well as a practical discussion. They understand that we are working through a process, and I don't think that they're going to interrupt that process by coming in, as long as we continue to make good progress. They are fully apprised of what's going on with the orchard. We have conversations with our representative there. So I don't think that it's an imminent danger of being taken over. It's a possibility in the long term, but I'm not worried about it this year, as long as we continue to make progress.
As a part of our interview process, we also spoke with a representative at MDAR and can corroborate that from our discussion with them, they're not looking to, take over the land or anything like that, as long as the town has a proactive process underway to try to get it under proper care. That they're satisfied with that.
But that's important to know that.
Other thoughts about resident objectives that you heard in your group, shared objectives?
Our group had 7 or 8 objectives, and I would say at least half of them were about the NPI coming back to their home on this land.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
Our group talked a lot about just clean water, the watershed, the water supply, and just we were discussing as to whether the the mainstream agriculture would support that, the clean water. Thank you.
Thank you. And we thank you for the conversations. We thank you for making the notes. It looks like we have a rich collection, and we'll, again, be supplementing those with the online answers as well. So we'll sort through all of these and bring them back. One of the things a point I wanted to make about the objectives, starting just with the simple 4 that we had gleaned from our conversations, is that they're not quite specific enough to actually make the judgment. So that's why we need the criteria. But it's easily imaginable in this simple table with those 4 objectives laid out that you could have any number of outcomes under any number of sale, lease, or other arrangement type situations where having sustainable stewardship of the land, honoring the land's legacy, complying with the APR, and engaging partners would all be fulfilled as objectives. And it doesn't give you enough specificity to really drill down to what that preferred outcome is. So that's why we need to do the next exercise, which is the criteria. And so the criteria, I would say, are where we've heard less consensus around in the conversations. As you drill down to those details of how do you measure success, this is what some examples of what we've heard. But there is, depending on who you're talking to, I think less agreement. So we're very interested in seeing what you all come up with in the room and online for more detailed criteria to measure success. And then we're particularly interested in looking through the data that you provide us tonight and looking for the patterns in that and seeing where the priorities lie. So some of the things we've heard would be to keep the land in productive commercial agriculture. That's both a part of the APR and a part of what a lot of people want to see the property used for. Planting and growing seasonal crops, using sustainable agriculture or best environmental practices, figuring out ways to both control pests on the property and control invasives as well, running the ability to run an agricultural operation of a similar size, 50 acres is a certain type of skill set, having an economically viable business, and operating consistent with the town's values as a community. These are things we've heard. Everyone in the room may not agree with these criteria, so we're getting more into the details, and I think this is where some of that disagreement is occurring. Yes, a question on these.
Are the town's values highlighted on the website in a particular way? Do you know them?
I know what my values are as a resident, but I don't think that we can prescribe values for the town that aligns with everybody. So we have not done that exercise.
Where did you hear that piece then? So that piece that you say operated consistent with town's values as a community, where did you hear that piece?
I think in the conversations, and I believe it is actually a statement that's also made in the language of the RFP. Yes, some other clarifying questions. Yes.
Just point of clarification. So are these tested against the original objectives when the widow Morrison sold the property to the town? You put up a slide with those, or are those abandoned and there's new objectives? I wondered what's happened to the original objectives from the original, maybe they're not relevant and they're disregarded, or are they still the same test? Maybe you're going to get to that, but thank you.
No, it's a good clarifying question. So I think the way I would think about it is that the conversation we just had about objectives, those objectives may be replacing the previous objectives. But that's not, I mean, I don't know. We need to look at the information you've given us and then take a look and compare. This actually is at a different level than the objectives it's more detailed, it's down lower. I would posit that, we haven't done this exercise, but there may be a way where you could comply with these criteria and fulfill the objectives that were described in the 2000 process.
I think you answered that. So if the stakeholders, whoever they are, I don't think that's been listed, have decided to abandon the original objectives, then at least you take that as an outcome of this process. We don't care about those anymore. We care about different things.
I don't know that we have the agency to be that definitive, but what we would highlight is that there's a difference between the original and the new, and then just make that clear.
Thank you.
Thanks. So just to add some clarification, I'm Amy, and I was on the Nagog Apple Orchard Working Group. So the Morrisons' intention was very simple. They wanted it in agriculture, and they wanted it in conservation. And so they accessed, to meet that objective, they accessed the APR program with the state, and then they accessed the conservation restriction program with the state. And so her objectives were met through those two state programs. And other than that, there wasn't a definition of, I want corn, I want cows, I want tomatoes. There was just agriculture and conservation.
So I was actually referring to the slide he put up that listed like 5 bullets that he said dated from the original acquisition with the Sudbury people and so on. That's what I was referring to.
Yeah.
I did mention the widow. She was a stakeholder at the time.
Yeah, and so, and just in terms of operating with the town's values, I don't know if people really got that from our town's master plan. I don't know if that's kind of where it came from. I don't think the town master plan has values in it, but it certainly highlights farming and keeping farms in town for sure, which is a value of our town, I think.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and I think it points to a part of the value of this exercise, and maybe an invitation as we think through this exercise, it's worthwhile to define things like values. So to actually be explicit about what you mean by being consistent with what are the items that you're trying to be consistent with as a community. So that would be an invitation to help us clarify through this process what is intended by something like community values. So those are things we've heard. These are very explicit criteria which are listed in the RFP for lease, the most recent one from this year, this fall, or sorry, we're in 2025, from last year, last fall. So experience operating and managing or managing a farm, capital investment plan for equipment that that respondent intends to use in farming operations, experiencing and licensing for pesticide application, and the comprehensiveness and quality of a proposed management plan. So those are measurable, clear, definitive, and have allowed, under the current RFP for lease, a process of a selection and then a discussion for negotiation to be occurring. In this room, you may not agree with those criteria, and I think that's through this process what we've been coming to understand, is that there's disagreement around the criteria. But just to be clear, there are criteria that have been used in the current process, and these are them. So the invitation in this exercise is to expand on this list, modify this list, completely overhaul this list, that's up to you. And the invitation is, again, returning to the small group discussion, to think about that next level down, the criteria by which you would judge a successful outcome. So we're trying to think beyond objectives and outcomes and think about the type, if the outcome is agricultural use, how are we going to judge that it's a successful respondent to agricultural use? Okay? So we'll take, again, another 15 minutes or so around criteria.
That was the criteria. No, I thought that was I think
Okay, let's go ahead and wrap up the conversations again. Thank you all. Let's come back together. And we welcome you, as we did before, if you'd like to stretch your legs and add a comment to the board, we welcome you to do so. And I should acknowledge and apologize that we had scheduled this meeting from 6:30 to 8, and it was already 8:05. So apologies, but it's always hard for us to cut off a vital and vibrant conversation. So we did want to let you continue. So thank you for discussing criteria and a more detailed level of measures, putting those down on the Post-its. Please make sure that we do have those thoughts, and we'll compile those again with what's in the room and what's online. And there was a comment that I think is worth mentioning back to the room, that it's difficult to do this simultaneously in some ways, to not talk about sort the objectives, prioritize them, talk about them, and then move down to the next level of criteria. We did that purposefully. Obviously we didn't have enough time to even do what we set out to do, even without that. But we will return in our second meeting on April 14th with the results. And one of the exercises that we plan to do that evening is a look at the results and a prioritization of both objectives and criteria. So we'll have a bit of an opportunity to do that sequentially next time. So we just wanted to make a few more points about the criteria, the more detailed measures. So I think hopefully it was clear in your discussions that the more detailed measures do make it more likely that you would have within a set of approaches and a set of potential outcomes, that there would be differentiation between the types of outcomes, and you'd be more enabled to make a choice. And so you see that's here. We've just collected the previously heard objectives and the previously established criteria, and this is just imaginary in terms of the table itself. But the other point that I wanted to make in terms of the near-term outcomes, and what we're talking about here, is on the current lease negotiation. And so with those 4 criteria that I put on the board before, there is a clear outcome. And so that is what's represented here in the table now, is that there is a lease candidate to the town which has fulfilled each of those criteria. And so that has been proceeding. It's our understanding that it's not yet complete, but just wanted to make that point that is still the circumstance which is facing the town in terms of decisions. And we'll be looking at the feedback from this evening to see how the objectives and criteria that you've provided us tonight might inform the continued discussion around that lease of the property. But again, just to make the point that under the current criteria that had been established, there is an outcome that looks beneficial. So there are other near-term opportunities and outcomes that we need to continue talking about, some of which we've already touched on. And then there are even, I would say there were too many branching sort of future paths here for us to even diagram. But there are, I will say, a variety of outcomes, even with the current lease negotiations in play. Regardless of how that works out, we still think there's value in continuing to have the conversations that we're having, because there's many other portions of the property that are not a part of those lease negotiations, and there's other scenarios that even involve the portions of the property that are under lease negotiation that are important for us to continue to discuss in regard to the objectives and criteria that the community would like to see undertaken. So we will continue with you. Hopefully many of you have availability for our second meeting. If not, you can join us online. We'll have that option available as well for that. Continuing to define the objectives and criteria so that we can more effectively build consensus toward those near-term and long-term outcomes. I think that's a very important and critical step. Again, a near-term outcome, as was illustrated by the question in the audience, there is near-term pressure from the Massachusetts agricultural folks to come into compliance on the property and be in compliance with APR. So that's a near-term outcome which needs to occur. We also need to continue the discussion to plan for the other portions of the property and to develop a long-term plan, again, even if there is a lease in place, so that the town doesn't find itself in the same circumstances that it found itself in before, where the lease, even a lease that's entered into in good faith from all parties, can be broken for any number of reasons, and then the town would find itself in the need of objectives and criteria to move forward with a new plan. So we think there's a lot of value. I don't agree with the perspective that sort of the outcome has already been decided. There's no reason for us to even keep talking about this. I think there's a lot of good reason for us to keep talking about this. So that's why we continue with this work. We did want to provide an opportunity, with the caveat we understand that we're already past our appointed time, but understand also that some people in the audience might not have found the framework we've created for this conversation to be satisfying or satisfactory. You might have other things you would wanted to say. And so we did want to invite the opportunity to provide either other comments or questions that we didn't cover or anything else you would like us to consider in this process. So we want to provide you the opportunity to do so. So we'll give you a moment for that. Yes, we'll bring a mic over.
Hello, thank you so much for this meeting. I would like to hear from the select members that are here how this meeting is going to play a role in their current lease negotiations with John Bransfield. Please.
Thank you. We are meeting with John Bransfield tomorrow. We would welcome the input here. If there are actionable things that are, can be included in a 20-year lease with John, with most of the terms and sort of large-scale arrangements have been settled. But if there are concerns about the use of the land, specifics about what he can do or can't do, we will absolutely take those into account and try to get them into the lease if it's practical to do so. So I would welcome any input on that, I guess, if you want to talk about it. I'm sorry?
It's all in the
It's all in the stickies. Okay, good. We'll get the stickies. I assume we will get the stickies.
We will record them in a transmittable fashion as soon as possible.
I know everybody's focused on the potential lease and things, but it's important to recognize that the objectives and the criteria here can also inform what would happen in the case of a shortened lease. That there can and should be clauses that allow exit by either party that enable additional objectives to be fulfilled. No one wants to see failure, but if failure happens, we want there to be success following that as well.
So to that end, there are termination clauses in the lease. Either the parties can agree for convenience. There are a large number of possible issues that could be cause default, in which case we would terminate the lease. I would also say that in addition to changing the criteria if the lease is shortened, this information will help us to define what happens when the lease ends in 20 years. I know that 20 years seems like a long time, but it isn't necessarily a long time when you look at the timeline that you saw earlier. And I have every intention of using the framework here to continue to build on some kind of structure to make sure that everyone is included and that we are fair and equitable in the way we use the land in the future. That's my intention.
George, sorry, I was looking at. I would like to understand the clauses within the lease being negotiated as to how the land is going to be improved from its current state and how the land is going to be monitored with teeth with regard to the lease so that the residents really have confidence that, quite frankly, the past experience showed us that we can't be confident.
I guess I'm on the spot again. The lease does not cover how the land will be improved. That is included in the management plan, which John has given us. I believe that was included in the package of the last meeting that we held, but you can definitely find it online. As far as observation and enforcement, the Select Board has discussed, and I am going to push for hiring someone who basically monitors the property in a professional capacity once a year, goes in the way that you would monitor a conservation restriction. This person would go in and monitor the agricultural preservation restriction, but also the management plan as it's defined, write a report and bring it to the select board and present it once a year. So this isn't going to be a couple of select board members who've never been on a farm before walking around and looking at trees and saying, oh yeah, they're trees, everything's good, which is what happened in the past. This is going to be money spent to have a professional evaluate what's going on. I am not qualified to judge whether Mr. Bransfield is doing a good job or not. I would like to hire someone who is qualified to judge that. I'm just going to keep this because you're going to keep asking.
I like to, for the town to consider, because Littleton has groundwater wells here in the town. I would like for a test to be done yearly to ensure that we're not getting any chemicals that's going into the water table that is not good, because we're having to build plants here to take PFAS out of the drinking water here in the town of Littleton. So I think that it's important with this agriculture that if they're going to use any pesticides up there and so forth, that a test is done yearly to ensure that it's okay what they're using up there. And I would also like to know, you're going to talk to the leasee tomorrow. Is that a public meeting or that's...
No, it's a lease negotiation. It's not a public meeting.
Okay, so when are y'all going to let the public know what you talked about?
When we will discuss the lease, the select board will discuss the lease, and it will be part of the packet at the meeting on Monday.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's go over here.
That's true, I'm afraid. My question is, so is there going to be a budget line item for the annual monitoring of this lease?
Oh, Mark's going to take it. Good.
So what we've talked about in the annual town meeting for May is we're going to create a revolving fund for the orchard. Money from the lease that we receive will go into that revolving fund so that we have a budget for the orchard. I believe there's roughly $50,000 that was allocated for the orchard previously that has not been spent, so that will be the seed money for that revolving fund. But hopefully, that will be the money we can use.
So sorry, back again. I thank the two of you. I thank you for bringing MAPC in here. With regard to the monitoring, I liked what I heard, Matthew. What I would like, though, because directionally I feel you're making this commitment and you've been acting in good faith. But a year from now, I would like to hear a commitment that we're going to hold another public meeting. I think this is very problematic experience for many residents. I would like to have a commitment for ongoing sessions with regard to openness. In other words, I don't want to be reduced to a 2-minute segment in response to a 1-year review of the thing. There's probably going to be greater questions, certainly at the beginning of the first year of a monitoring plan. And I think that needs to be brought out so that we're really feeling the opportunity to understand what's taking place and get you the opportunity to answer the questions that are in the community.
So I think the right format would be when the first year's inspection is presented to the select board, that we have a public hearing around that, and people can come and discuss the issues that they see, whether there are observations of what's going on in the orchard that is positive or negative. Mr. Bransfield can come to discuss his plans for the next year. I think that's a great idea.
I agree. And I have another concern about the lease. To me, 20 years seems very short term, especially in light of the length of time people have been farming that land. I would like to make sure that if the new leasee removes the apple trees, that he has a plan for the soil, because he's going to tear up all these trees. There's already a lot of runoff from the down the hill. I'm wondering how a bunch of pots on the hill are going to contain the runoff. And if he leaves in the long term, if he takes all the trees and sets something up with his pots, and he leaves 10, 15, 20 years from now, we're going to have empty fields with holes where the pots were, and what's going to happen to the soil. I'm concerned about how he's going to leave the land.
So a couple of answers. First is he is not going to take any soil out. He is going to bring in wood chips and make all the soil that he's going to be using in his pots. The second one is, if you look at his management plan, it is very focused on restoring that land with native species and the way it should have been before it was an apple orchard, and basically taking care of it in a way that doesn't require herbicides and pesticides. So I think that removing the apple trees will be a net positive. He's talked about coppices and hedgerows. If you read his management plan, it's kind of astonishing at what he plans to do with that land. I think that my expectation is that the orchard will be a much better state after 20 years than it is now.
Could I speak to your question too? Is this working? Yes. Where does the Bransfield land management plan live right now for folks to have a look at that?
I'm pretty sure that it's linked on the town website. There's a Nagog Orchard Working Group webpage, and we have a set of documents there. If you can't find it, email me. My name is on the website, and I will send it to you.
So I have it, but I just was curious. Because that could answer a lot of questions, including water, chemical use, runoff, all of this. It's really quite thorough and involved, and it's a little bit reductive to say a bunch of stuff in pots, because it's a pretty unique form of growing, encircled by permaculture, food forest resources. So he's also interested in keeping as many trees as he can, and the peaches and the viable trees, and on his own dime with his own equipment, being able to remove the diseased and dead trees. So that piece alone is a major benefit. I felt some more misgivings about this potential lessee before I learned more about his management plan, and when I did, was quite dazzled by it. I also want to say that Jonathan has spoken to wanting a really collaborative with MPI experience here with public education. This seems to be a really heartfelt mission, and I'm very concerned about rematriation of land for MPI as well. So I think as townspeople, as much as we can help foster and cultivate collaboration right now, we're in a really perilous time for our climate. Biodiversity, climate change are the elephant in the room, and they are a chicken and egg kind of thing. We're really at a precipitous moment right now, and this is an opportunity to do something with this land that serves all creatures. This is such an important moment, and if we can provide as much support as possible to all of these really heartfelt, interested parties with such great missions, let's come together to support collaboration for the greater good and for this beautiful property.
Thank you. The management plan is also available in the agenda for the meeting that we had with John Bransfield on February 12th.
Yes. To continue off of Aaron with collaboration and inclusion, I would really like it if the select board would hold off on signing a lease with John Bransfield until after we have the April meeting because I believe that in order to have an encompass plan for this property, it's not just the APR land, it's also the land under conservation restriction. It's also the lot across the street with that plan that you guys are hoping to eventually subdivide. So there's a big picture that needs to be looked at, and how does the Neshoba Praying Indians become a part of all of that as well. And I think that that would be really important, because by signing a lease with Bransfield before we can continue to have that additional conversation about those other parcels, how do we know how they fit into all the pieces, and having that whole collaboration. And you know, there was talks about having parcels of the APR land for the Neshoba Praying Indians, and not just completely all under John Bransfield's lease. So there were these other options that were brought up to the table, and I don't know if the select board have really looked into those, or as we as a town have talked about these other options, so that we can include the Neshoba Praying Indians in this process. Also, about the soil and the runoff, he's going to be digging containers that could be as big as the size of a bathtub. So he's going to be digging out soil. So he will need to be doing something with that. Also, he'll be using landscape fabric around the containers. So the vegetation underneath will be killed. So if he changes venue or leaves, yes, we will be dealing with an issue of needing to remediate that land. And that is also one of my concerns. And I don't know if that's in the lease, because that's not in the APR land. So, thank you. Anybody else?
Looks like we have one more, maybe.
Just one small quick point. With all this reconstruction and hedge building and so forth, what's the noise pollution to people local to the area?
We've talked to John quite a bit about this, and he was actually concerned that it would be a problem. There are going to be trucks coming and going for very short periods of time in the spring when he gets his wood chips delivered, and like those would be large dump trucks. He said it's on the order of like a half dozen a day for a week, something like that. And then there will definitely be like smaller trucks, box trucks, to take the plants away. But I don't think it's going to be a very significant amount of traffic.
What are his hours of operation?
So I don't know. I don't know. I believe he'll have to abide by whatever noise ordinance exists, but we have not specified that.
Maybe a good idea.
Okay, fair enough.
Just using equipment.
Yeah, like
For the
chainsaws and
operation,
stuff. Yeah.
full
No,
operation.
we can talk to him about that.
Thank you.
I'm also concerned about the hedgerows, and I haven't seen, actually, I have read his proposal, and I don't remember every detail of it. I'm concerned about the hedgerows and blocking the views. It's a hill, it's a beautiful hill. People drive Nagog Hill Road all the time just for the view. I watch them go by my house every day. So I'm concerned about that. Where is he going to plant hedgerows? We're going to have 5-foot hedgerows all the way down the road? I don't think that would be beneficial to the overall community connection with the land. It will feel more like, boxing off the property. And the other thing about the noise, when it was a farm, those tractors were going all the time, all Sunday. If you live on the hill, you were used to it. I don't miss that noise, but a farm is going to be noisy. That's just saying. But bringing big tractor trailers up there and maintaining the roads, if there's significant traffic, is a whole different thing.
Well, I think we're going to have to give him the opportunity to get started up there, so there's going to be some noise. So it's not like it's going to be a continued run of it, for years in. I think he needs to get what equipment that he has up there and get started, and I think that it probably will taper off somewhat to the noise up there.
It's going to be continuous every year. Just like you said, spring, every summer.
Great. Well, not seeing any more hands. Thank you all for taking the time to fill in the parts of discussion that we weren't able to elaborate on in our framework. So I just want to touch on next steps. Again, we'll be compiling all the notes and feedback, both from the in-room and online. I didn't put this in writing anywhere, but we expect that we'll probably keep the online survey open, say until like April 1st or so, thereabouts. So that is, hopefully people hear that, and we can also put that on a flyer or something. We will be convening here again in this same room on Monday, April 14th at 6:30. We have already made the mental note to schedule it from 6:30 to 8:30 instead of 8 o'clock, so we'll give ourselves a little more time to talk next time, maybe even to 9, who knows. And then the town will, as we've heard, continue with discussion on the lease negotiations. And then we all also need to be continuing to plan for the other portions of the property and other sort of overlapping scenarios on even the APR lands as well. So thank you all for taking the time to join us this evening, and we appreciate all of your thoughtful comments, the civil demeanor that you were able to discuss it with, and all the time you put into those thoughts on the notes. So thank you so much.